The Trump administration has decided to suspend all security assistance to Pakistan. The move was preempted by Pakistan's strong retort to Donald Trump's tweet, calling the South Asian country of being a safe haven for terrorists. This, in addition to the $255 million that has already been kept in abeyance as the White House reviews what they call Pakistan's level of cooperation in fighting terrorism. But will these measures force Pakistan to come down hard on terrorism living inside the country? And does the civilian government has enough might to tackle these extremist forces? Joining us now to discuss the ramifications of this move, Neelam, former Indian ambassador, director at Gateway House. Neelam, thank you so much, as always, for joining us on Bloomberg Quint. Let me begin by asking you about what you made of these developments. First, you saw the tweet from President Trump. There was a reaction. And now the United States has walked the talk by actually suspending military aid. What does this mean?
Well, it clearly means that American frustration has boiled over. So President Trump, of course, tends to make all his announcements on Twitter. But in this case, the administration itself, the State Department, etc., is following up by announcing specific steps like, withholding this $255 million. And also, there have been reports that some $400 million, which had been held up earlier, also are not likely to be paid to the Pakistanis. They are clearly very frustrated with Pakistan not taking any action against terrorist groups.
Okay, so just the question on this, Neelam. When President Trump was here, he also spoke about asking India to play a much more active role in managing Afghanistan. Is this part of a new strategy for the United States towards South Asia? And what does all of this mean for India?
Well, there are two things here. One, of course, is that in their new national security document, the strategy document, which has just been issued, they do criticize the Pakistanis for the same reasons, for not taking enough action against terror groups. And they do call upon India to play a greater role in Afghanistan. But the strategy document itself only calls for a greater economic role, which India had been playing anyway. India has had more than $2 billion of investment in Afghanistan in the last decade. But in things like restoring a hospital, restoring the electricity supply to Kabul city, that kind of thing, there has been no explicit call on India to get involved in any military sense. And the only military-related program that we have had is the training of members of the Afghan National Army in India.
You've seen these foreign policy measures play out for a very long time, Neelam. Does history suggest that has Pakistan actually acted to any of these threats or actual measures by the United States in the past?
Not really, because what happens is that every few years, the Americans will express their frustration with the Pakistanis. And then after a little while, it will all go back to normal, because the Pakistanis are always expressing their outrage and saying that they have taken a lot of actions and that they have had so many of their service personnel become victims of these things. But the fact is that today, money talks. It used to be the case that American investment in Pakistan used to be big. It used to be the case that American aid and American military support funds used to be significant. Today, China provides more aid. Chinese investment is, just last year, is over $1 billion in the China-Pakistan economic corridor, in the power projects, etc., whereas American investment was $43 million. So, why should Pakistan care? It cares even less now than it used to in the past, because it is fully aware that it remains the channel for the pass-through of American troops, American fuel, equipment, military equipment, etc., to Afghanistan, because America, of course, has no relations with Iran, which is the only other maritime neighbor of Afghanistan. And the two northern neighbors, Tajikistan and Uzbekistan, that route is a very expensive route, as the Americans found out, because in 2011, Pakistan actually closed the transit from Karachi for a few months because there had been some incident on the border in which 16 Pakistani army personnel got killed. So actually, America remains dependent on Pakistan for its military operations in Afghanistan.
Ma'am, on the point of China, what do you think India's perspective would be if Pakistan and China continue to sort of get closer, both strategically and in terms of economic relations? Does India's sort of hackles get raised a little bit more?
Well, you know, China and Pakistan, like they say, are iron brothers, and their, relationship is sweeter than honey and higher than mountains, all that kind of hyperbolic stuff. They are getting closer, and they will get even closer as the investments that China is making in infrastructure, but particularly in power plants, thermal power plants, which have begun to come on stream, begins to give a boost to Pakistani GDP. Now, in the last year, I think Pakistan had a rate of growth roughly equal to India's, 5.7 or 5.5% or something. This growth will be sustained. It may even go up a little. The problem will come a little later, as came in the case of Sri Lanka, when Pakistani indebtedness to China grows even further, and then it needs a bailout from the IMF. As in 2013, they were given a package of more than $6 billion for 5 years. But when they need more money after that to defray debt to China, then Pakistan will have to worry about the fact that the United States still has a veto over what the IMF does in terms of structural support funds.
All right, Neelam, we'll leave it there. Many thanks indeed for joining us. Neelam Deo, former India ambassador, talking about the United States and its actions against Pakistan and the implication that it has on India.